Chapter 15. An Invitation by Letter. The next day, 9 November. I woke up only after a long sleep of 12 hours. Advice came according to his habit to know how Mr. had spent the night and offer him his services. He had left his friend, the Canadian, sleeping like a man who would have done only that all his life. I let the brave boy babble to his fantasy without answering too much. I was concerned about the absence of Captain Nemo during our session the day before, and I hoped to see him again today, soon. I dressed my clothes in byssus. Their nature provoked more than once the reflections of advice. I taught him that they were made with the glossy and silky filaments that attach to the rock, the good fate of shell, very abundant on the shores of the Mediterranean. Once they were made of beautiful cloths, because they were both very warm and very soft. The crew of the Nautilus could therefore dress cheaply without asking for anything from the cotton tree, or the sheep, or the silk glass of the earth. When I was dressed, I went to the large living room. It was deserted. I immersed myself in the study of these treasures of conchology crammed under the windows. I also searched vast herbaria filled with the rarest marine plants, and which, although dried, retained their admirable colors. Among these precious hydrophytes, I noticed Vertici cladistif padnes pan of Callirpes, with leaves of vine of the Calatamnes graniferus, delicate ceramis with scarlet hues of the agars, arranged in fan of acetabules, similar to very depressed mushroom hats, and which were for a long time classified among the ephytes. Finally, a whole series of varic. The day passed without me honoring myself of Captain Nemo. The panels of the living room did not open. Perhaps we did not want to blast on these beautiful things. The direction of the Nautilus maintained to the east-northeast, its speed at 12 miles, its depth between 50 and 60 meters. The next day, 10 November. Even abandonment, same loneliness. I saw no one of the crew. Naive advice spent most of the day with me. They were surprised by the inexplicable absence of the captain. This singular man, was he sick? He wanted to modify his plans towards us. After all, following the remark of we enjoyed complete freedom, we were delicately and abundantly fed. Our host stood in the terms of his treaty. We could not complain. And besides, the singularity of our destiny reserved us such beautiful compensations that we did not yet have the right to accuse him of his newspaper. There I began the day. Adventures which allowed me to tell them with the most scrupulous accuracy and curious details. I wrote it on a paper made with the Navy Mostare on the 11th of November in the early morning. The fresh air spread inside the Nautilus told me that we had returned to the surface of the ocean in order to renew the oxygen supplies. I was heading towards the central staircase and I climbed on the platform. It was 6 a.m. I found the weather covered the gray sea, but barely calm swell. The Captain Nemo that I hoped to meet there would come. I did not notice that the helmsman, trapped in his glass cage, sitting on the protrusion produced by the hull of the canoe. I sucked with delight the saline emanations. Little by little, the mist dissipated under the action of the solar rays. The radiant astrae of the flaming horizon glance like a powder trail. The clouds scattered in the heights were colored with bright tuna, admirably nuanced, and many tongues of cat announced wind for the whole day. But what was the wind to this Nautilus that the storms could not frighten? So I admired this joyful sunrise, so cheerful, so invigorating, when I heard someone climb up to the platform. I was preparing to greet Captain Nemo, but it was his second that I had already seen during the first visit of the captain, who appeared. He advanced on the platform. and did not seem to notice my presence. His powerful glasses in the eyes, he scrutinized all the points of the horizon with extreme attention. Then this examination, he approached the panel and uttered a sentence of which here exactly the terms I retained, because every morning it reproduces in identical conditions, was so designed, the orni virce. What it meant, I cannot say. These words, spoken the second descended. I thought that the Nautilus was going to resume its underwater navigation, so I was returning to the sign, and by the passageways I returned to my room. 5 days passed without the situation changed. Every morning I climbed on the platform. The same sentence was spoken by the same individual. Captain Nemo did not seem I had taken my side, not to see it any more. When on November 16 returned to my room with N and counsel, I found on the table a note at my address. I opened it. With an impatient hand, it was written with a frank and clear writing, but a little Gothic, and which recalled the German types. This note was worded in these terms: Mr. Professor Aronnax, on board the Nautilus, November 16th, 1867. Invited to a Captain Nemo's hunting party that will take place tomorrow morning in these forests of the island Crespa. He hopes that nothing will prevent Mr. Professor to attend, and he will see with pleasure that his companions join him. The commander of the Nautilus, Captain Nemo. A hunt, cried Ned. And in these forests of the island Crespa, added advice. But he goes ashore this particular. There, resumed Ned Land. It seems clearly indicated to me, saying by rereading the letter. Well, we must accept, replied the Canadian. Once on land, we will advise to take a side. Besides, I would not be angry to eat some pieces of fresh venison, without trying to reconcile what was contradictory between the obvious horror of Captain Nemo for the continents and the islands and his invitation to hunt in the forest. I was content to answer first. See what I consulted the island Crespa planisphere, and by 32° 40' north latitude and 167° 50' west longitude, I found an islet that was recognized in 1801 by Captain Crespo, and that the ancient Spanish named Roca de la Plata, that is to say, Rock of Silver. We were therefore about 1,800 miles from our starting point, and the slightly modified direction of the Nautilus brought it back to the southeast. I showed my companions this little rock lost in the middle of the North Pacific. If Captain Nemo sometimes goes to land, tell them he at least chose islands absolutely deserted. Ned Land nodded without answering, then advice, and left me after a supper that was served to me by the silent and impassive steward. I felt not without some concern the next day that I woke up on November 17th. The Nautilus was absolutely still. I dressed slowly, and I entered the large living room. The captain was there. He waited for me to rise and greeted me, and asked me if it was appropriate for me to accompany him. As he made no reference to his absence during these days, I refrained from talking to him, and I answered simply that my companions and I were ready to follow him. Only, sir, I would allow myself to address you a question addressed to Mr. Aronnax, and if I can answer it, I will answer it. And well, Captain, how is it that you, who broke all relationship with the earth, you owned forests in Crespo Island, Mr. Professor replied to me, the captain, the forests that I own do not ask the sun, neither its light nor its heat, nor the lions, nor the tigers, nor the quadrupeds, nor any frequent they are known to me alone. These are not terrestrial forests, but many of the underwater forests of the underwater forests. I wrote, yes, Mr. Professor, and you offer me to lead me precisely on foot. and even on dry foot, by hunting, by shooting the gun in hand. The gun in hand. I looked at the commander of the Nautilus in an air that was not flattering for his person. Decidedly, he has the sick brain thought. I had an access that lasted 8 days, and even that lasts still. It's a shame I liked it. Stranger than crazy, this thought was clearly read on my face. But Captain Nemo simply invited me to follow him, and I followed him as a man resigned to everything. We arrived in the dining room, where lunch was served. Aronnax told me the captain, "I will pray you to share my lunch without way, but will cause us a walk. But I will promise you in the forest, I did not commit myself to make you meet a restaurant lunch. So a man who will probably dine very late, I honor the meal. It consisted of various fish and slices of excellent Alaturia zoophyte, raised of very apparative algae such as Porphyria laciniata and Laurentia pramafatida. The drink consisted of clear water, to which, in the example of the captain, I added a few drops of a fermented liquor, and following the Kamchaktian fashion of the algae, known as Redimeni palmi, Captain Nemo ate first without speaking a single word. Then he told me, "Professor, when I proposed to come hunt in my forests of Crespa, you believed me, in contradiction with myself. When I told you that it was a forest under the sea, you believed me. You must never judge men lightly. But, Captain, believe that. Please listen to me, and you will see, if you must accuse me of madness or contradiction. I listen to you, Mr. Professor. You know as well as I, the man can live underwater, on condition of taking with him his supply of breathable air. In underwater works, the worker covered with an impermeable garment, and the head trapped in a metal capsule, receives the air from the outside by means of a pump and flow regulator. It is the device of escapade, say I. Indeed, but in these conditions the man is not free. It is attached to the pump, which sends the air to him by a pipe of rubber or real chain that drives him to the ground. And if we were to be thus held in the Nautilus, we could not go far, and the means to be free. I was asking for it to use the roller device of near Rose, imagined by 2 of your compatriots, but which I perfected for my use, and which will allow you to risk yourself in these new physiological conditions without your organs suffering in any way. They consist of a tank of thick sheet metal, in which I store the air under a pressure of 50 atmospheres. This tank is fixed on the middle back of a shoulder strap like a soldier's bag. Its upper part forms a box where the air maintained by a mechanism of its bellows can escape only at its normal tension in the roller device as it is used. 2 rubber pipes starting from this box come to a kind of pavilion, which traps the nose and mouth of the operator. One serves to introduce the air inspired, the other at the end of the exhaled air, and the tongue there or the needs of it breathing. But me, who faces considerable pressures at the bottom of the seas, I had to lock my head like that of a scaphandre in a sphere of copper. And it is to this sphere that end the 2 pipes, inspirators and exhalers, perfectly, Captain Nemo. But the air that you carry must wear quickly, and as soon as it contains only 15% of oxygen, it becomes unbreathable, probably. But I told you, Mr. Aronnax, the pumps of the Nautilus allow me to store it under considerable pressure, and under these conditions, the tank of the device can provide breathable air for 9 or 10 he's. I have no objection to have answered. I will only ask you, Captain, how you can light your route at the bottom of the ocean with the device Rumkorf, Mr. Aronnax. If the first is worn on the back, the second battery is made up of a belt from benzene that I put into activity, not with bichromate of potash, but with sodium. An induction coil collects the electricity produced and directs it to a lantern of a particular arrangement. In this lantern is a glass coil that contains only a residue of carbon dioxide. When the device works, this gas becomes luminous, giving a continuous white light. So provided I breathe and I see Captain Nemo, to all my objections, you make such overwhelming answers that I dare not doubt. However, if I am forced to admit the Rural and Ruhmkorff devices, I ask to make reserves for the rifle. You want to arm me. But it is not a powder gun, answered the Corse. So it is a wind gun, no doubt. How do you want me to make powder on my board, having neither salter, nor sulfur, nor coal from elsewhere? I say medium, 855 times denser than the air. It would be necessary to overcome a considerable resistance. Would not be a reason. There are some cannons perfected after Fawn by the English Philp, Collars, and Berley, by the French Fursey, by the Italian Landi, who are equipped with a particular system of closure and who can fire in these conditions. But I repeat, not having powder, I replaced it with high-pressure air that the pumps of the Nautilus provide, which can, if necessary, provide me. It is enough for this of a tap to dock. Besides, Mr. Aronnax, you will see by yourself that during these submarine hunts, one does not make great expenditure of air or bullet. However, it seems to me that in this half-darkness, and in the middle of this very dense liquid, cannot blows in relation to the atmosphere far away, and are hardly mortal. Sir, with this rifle, all the blows are deadly. On the contrary, and as soon as an animal is hit so slightly that tonight falls struck by lightning. Why? Because it is not ordinary bullets that this rifle launches, but small glass capsules invented by the Austrian chemist Lindenbrock, and of which I have a considerable supply. These glass capsules, covered with a steel armature and weighed down by a lead pellet, are real small bottles of lyddie, in which the electricity is forced to a very high voltage. At the lightest shock it discharges, and the animal so powerful that it fell mar. I would add that these capsules are not bigger than the number 4, and that the charge of an ordinary rifle could contain 10. I no longer argue, answering by rising from the table, and I have only to take my rifle from elsewhere. I will go. Nemo led me to the back of the Nautilus, and passing by the cabin of Ned and Counsel, I called my 2 companions, who also followed us. Then we arrived at a cell located near the precipice, engine room, and in which we had to put on our clothes of